All right, right now, more importantly, we have a race this year for the important job of mayor. And we always respect candidates who are willing to put their hats in the ring. And this is not going to be ordinary times. You know, they're going to be asked to govern in extraordinary times in ways that we don't completely yet understand. We know Ron is extremely prepared. She has lots of materials for us. She sent out her resume through Bill's email on Wednesday. So if you want to refer to that, and there are links within that to go deeper if you want. So now I'd like to invite Rhonda to tell her story, why she would like to be our mayor. And thank you so much for coming today.
Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
All right. I'm going to start off by talking about something that everybody in this room can relate to. And I mean everybody. It's called a job. And either it was your first job, it was a new job, it was a promotion, it was a lateral. Everybody here has been in that situation. And when you look at that situation of a job, the first thing you do is you read the job description. You go down the list, you see what's there, and then what you do is you take your resume and you try to link it up to everything on that list. And you try to check the box and you see where you might be a little deficient, but then you go on and you see if you are capable of doing it. So basically, your friends and your family, your loved ones say, oh yeah, go ahead and do it, and not a problem. But you have to have the evidence, and as an attorney, evidence is extremely important. So you check the resume, you check the boxes. Now when it comes to mayor, and only one other person in this room has read the code and the charter, except for me. I mean, both of us have done that, and the gentleman can raise his hand if he'd like to, Alderman Arnett. But anyway, I know that. For sure. So I checked the code in the charter, and it said about mayor, it really didn't have a job description. It's in the charter, Article 5, Section 1. He's called, or she's called, the Chief Executive Officer. I looked up Wikipedia. A Chief Executive Officer is a top-ranking corporate officer charged with the management of an organization. And the key underlying word here is, for me, preparation. I was a Brownie and a Girl Scout, and what's the motto? Be prepared. President Lincoln had a saying, I will prepare and someday, maybe, one day, my chance or my opportunity will come. Am I, Rhonda Pindell Charles, prepared to manage an organization such as the City of Annapolis with the level of trust that is needed for our city to move forward? For me, I had to go through and examine the evidence, which is my resume, my work and my life experiences, professional as well as personal. At the age of 10, I started working for my mom, who was an algebra teacher at the Wally H. Bates High School. And what I did for her was I typed tests and graded papers. Now, at the age of 10, I knew nothing about algebra. So what I learned from that experience was that ask questions if you don't understand or you don't know. So that was the first lesson I learned. When I came to be 11, a year later, my dad and his brother and their cousin owned their own building contracting business here in Annapolis. And my dad was the toughest boss I ever had, and I won't say any more about that. And I'm an only child. But anyway, so what I learned, I was a secretary. I typed invoices, I typed contracts, and I also did payroll. So I had to be extremely organized. I learned that. Had a strong work ethic, and I knew on Friday I needed to get everything else done because Friday was payroll day. In junior high school, I was a candy striper at Annapolis Medical on Franklin Street, and it was the first time I'd ever been out of the house as a volunteer even to do something on that level. It was a medical center, I was in the children's unit, and so empathy was a big part of that, and just learning how that whole operation developed. Then I worked for my church, and anybody here who's worked in the church knows you have all ages, all backgrounds, all educational levels, and that sort of thing in a faith-based hierarchy. So that can be a little touch and go at times. Then I was a dishwasher and a busboy at the old buffeteria at Montgomery Ward, and what I learned it's a hard physical job with very little money involved, and it's really a job that doesn't have a lot of respect. And when I look at the immigrant community, and we all go to restaurants, we see our immigrant community working in these jobs. And I'm always cognizant and I respect the job that these persons do on our behalf and everyone else's behalf. Then I worked for a blast cleaning company. This was my first summer job, and blast cleaning involved the maritime industry, and I learned a lot. The gentleman who was the in charge of the business, it was a family-owned business, and but there was one person there, not in the family, who was not particularly kind, and I won't take it any further than that. But I learned a lot about working with people who may not think that you ought to be in a certain place. Then I worked for Sears one summer, and customer service, but I worked in accounting first. And then they put me over to price changing. I asked kids, what do you think I did? Miss Rhonda, you changed prices. Yes, we did that. And I learned the art of repetitive work. On the computer, 5.99, 5.99. And I did that maybe 500 times in one day. But I learned that repetitive work is extremely important work, and the value of customer service. Then when I got to Morgan State University, I worked for college professor Frank Turner. He was in the House of Delegates, but he was also a judge in Howard County at one point. And Professor Turner just passed away last month. His funeral was on this past Sunday. And I got another view of how colleges operate, not from a student standpoint, but from the level of professor standpoint. Then for 4 summers, I worked at Maryland National Bank, which was on Church Circle. It took up the whole block. That was an experience. And I didn't realize it at the time. There were a lot of elected officials, Mike Bush, and all those folks used to come in that bank all the time. I knew Wednesdays was state payday, Fridays was city payday, so you knew you had to be organized, you needed enough money in your tray, and all that sort of thing. But I also learned the factor of trust. People trust you with their money and with looking at certain financial things that they had going on in their bank accounts. And that's extremely important. People have to trust you, especially when it comes to money. And so then once in law school, for 2 semesters, I worked for the Office of the Public Defender here in the county. That gave me a real idea of how government worked and what it means to use the Constitution. Everybody deserves counsel, and that was a good opportunity. I worked with the youth at that point. Then my first real legal job was with the Department of Natural Resources in the Attorney General's office. I was one of the attorneys at that time. I was there for 4.5 years. And the strange thing about it was the job that I got in the Public Defender's office, Mr. Eddie Albert hired me. He was one of the bank customers. And what I tell kids is, you never know who's watching you. And so when I got to Natural Resources, another gentleman who was a bank customer, Ned Lawson, hired me. And I really didn't even have an interview because he could see my work product, my work ethic in the bank. So I got hired by the Department of Natural Resources. And that to me, was the cutting edge at that point in the early 80s of the environmental revolution that we're having now. It started with, I traveled all over the state, from Western Maryland and West Virginia to Cecil County to Ocean City to Southern Maryland and all around. And I got to see a good portion, a lot of the state, which was really an eye-opening experience. I worked a lot with Forest and Park Service, but also with water resources. And I see that the Maryland Environmental Service actually came out of the Department of Natural Resources during that time. So I got to see up front and personal, and I was part of the team that led the environmental revolution because that was the early 80s. But also I want to pick up on something that my friend reminded me of this morning. About 10 years or so ago in Chambers Park in Ward 3, we had an opportunity to build a stormwater management center right there in the park, and it was something that had never been done in our ward at all. And we want to thank Spark Creek Conservancy and many of the other organizations, the committees that's with that project, and Woman as well. Environment, even with the maritime industry, when I worked there that summer, that was kind of a tasting of the environment for me, and then going on to natural resources. Then I went part-time I was still at Natural Resources. I was a hearing officer in Baltimore City as a volunteer. I conducted proceedings regarding vehicle impoundments and warranted sewage charges, and I wrote and rendered legal opinions. I was basically a judge for that situation. So then I got hired in Baltimore City, and as a prosecutor in the state's attorney's office. That really was a great experience. I was 29 at the time. By the age of 35, I had 5 distinct management positions at that particular time. I was there in the juvenile courts division, so I went to court. I was a charging supervisor. I supervised 20 attorneys, 15 support staff. We handled, in my division alone, over 30,000 hearings a year in just that division. Then I became a trainer of what we call the baby prosecutors. Those who, this was their first job, and I had an opportunity to do that. Then I rose up to the deputy division chief. By this time, I've been there about 5 years, so I rose pretty well in the organization. I trained in all that time law enforcement officers at the police academy from Maryland and Pennsylvania, college, universities, libraries, housing, all those officers that were in those situations and in those positions I trained, including grand juries, juvenile services, and DSS. In Baltimore City, in the state's attorney's office, we had overall about 300 attorneys, about 150 support staff. In the city, we had about 3,500 law enforcement officers, police, and about 750 residents. And so we were in the top 10 of the largest cities at that time in America. This required managing a very large and complex organization, a very large metropolitan city on a daily and long-term basis. That was a haul. My work week, Monday through Friday, but every Friday, I would say 95% of the time for years, I worked until midnight in that Baltimore City courthouse. There was so much work to do, sometimes until 1 in the morning. The building was open all night long. Because you know when you come in Monday morning, you never know what you're going to face. And so this experience and what I went through required skill and sometimes surgical decision makings. And for 8 years of that time, I handled specialized physical child abuse cases as well as companion domestic violence cases. Also, I was chosen by the state's attorney herself to host 2 separate legal delegations that came to the city, one from Russia and one from China. So I got an international kind of component to what I was doing there. From that 20-and-a-half-year experience in Baltimore City, 5 of all the prosecutors that I trained, and there were hundreds, 15 of them have become judges on every level of Maryland's judiciary, from the Supreme Court, Appellate Court, Circuit, and District. One is a U.S. judge on the federal level. And 3 elected state's attorneys, Ann Colitis here, Charlie Smith in Frederick County, as well as Ivan Bates now in Baltimore City. And as we look at our country nationwide, our judicial system, this judicial system will be the branch of government that will be the guardrails that literally holds our democracy together. And so when we look at what I recall, what we did in Baltimore City, that really was impactful when looking at things and how they operate today. In 2004, over 20 years ago, I was blessed to be able to work for the Anne Arundel County Health Department. I retired from Baltimore City after 20-and-a-half years. My parents were elderly, and I'll get into that later, about some personal things that I had to take care of. I was a program manager for the Office of Minority Health. We made sure the health messages got out to the African American, the Asian communities, and the Hispanic Latino communities. And we had an immigration forum, the likes of which they'd never seen before. And after I supervised a staff that reflected the people that we were serving in the communities. And when I look at that after 20 years, and many of them I still see, I can still connect with on a regular basis, we still have a great relationship, I do, with the Asian community as well as the Hispanic Latino community. Then I went on to Anne Arundel County Public Schools, where I was there for 16 years, where I did community outreach. And I was blessed to be able to, part of that, I was at the central office on Riva Road, but also for 7.5 years, I was at the Frank Herbert Harmon Elementary School, which is out in West County, in our county, near the casino. We had 800 students, we had 90 staff, and I was responsible for doing a lot of the community outreach. I worked with all grade levels, from pre-K to 5, and then, and that's near Fort Meade, so we had a student body that reflected over 30 countries around the world.
Wow.
And then, I'm here today as the city alderwoman for Ward 3, but what I will say is this: since I've been there, I've had an opportunity to work with two mayors, Mayor Pindell and Mayor Buckley. And both of them, Republican, Democrat. I was given many opportunities to serve as acting mayor. And the longest stint that I had was for 3 weeks in January 2020 to February, where Mayor Buckley had to go home to Australia, over 10,000 to visit and say goodbye to his at that time. At this point, I'm also the public safety chair for the council, so I work very closely with the police department, the fire department, and our Office of Emergency Management. At this point, I now look to see if I've checked all the job description boxes when it comes to being prepared, being able to manage, and to be a trusted decision maker. But there is generally one box at the end of that job description that needs to be checked, and it says, other duties as assigned. We all know what that is, and we don't know what that is. And what is that? It's those crises and emergencies that will definitely come up when managing an organization. That's when the rubber meets the road. Am I prepared? Can I be a trusted decision maker? And can I do it on day one? I was ready immediately 5 years ago when, again, the mayor had to go home to see his dying mother. And when I signed the book, we have to sign the book when we are assigned that task. And there's an end date on it, a beginning and an end. There was no end date. And what the clerk told me was, we don't know when he's coming back. And so that was a situation that I had to make some decisions going forward. And that's why continuity of government is extremely important. And add to that, again, we are in extremely uncertain times. When I take a look at the city charter and the code, two things vividly stand out to me. I read it from cover to cover, like Alderman Arnett did, and has done for many, many years. And so I kind of follow his lead. He may not know that, but I do. But anyway, full disclosure. But anyway, two things that really stand out to me. And when I look at that, within the code, we have 7 standing committees and 1 citizen committee. When I look at that code, the first committee, standing committee is listed is finance, the second one is public safety, and the third one is rules and city government. Now, whether that is the priority set back then, and Alderman Arnett has served on at least 2 of those committees, I know. I don't know if it was done deliberately or not, but that kind of tells me something maybe within the code. And the second thing is, and I'm going to kind of take a wild guess on this one, I didn't do anything scientific. I would say 75% of that code references planning and zoning, the director and staff and their duties, as well as public works, the director and their duties. They have a huge responsibility within our government to take care of all of us when we need to be taken care of. And so I find that to be fascinating. So in so many ways, but I'm not taking away from anything about the other stellar departments that we have in the city, not at all. So in many ways, for all departments, the comprehensive plan, and Alderman Arnett and I read it from cover to cover, over 500 pages, is the template. That's the template and the guiding light, especially for something called small area plans. And that's something where we, Alderman Arnett and I, met with the planning and zoning director several times, and I think we guided our colleagues to look at each ward, and each ward has 6, I will say, goals or focuses that we have, and every ward is different, so that's what we did. And if you look at the comp plan, it's somewhere between pages 41 and 57 or something like that. You can see what Ward 8, Ward 7, Ward 2, Ward 1, and all the wards' focuses are. And to me, that's kind of the crux of the comprehensive plan. With that being said, there are 4 first-time crises that we have never experienced before since my tenure on the council. Number one, the Capitol mass shooting in June of 2018. It could have been worse, but blessedly, I'll say, about a week before that happened, Chief Simmons of the Office of Emergency Management and his Deputy Chief, Dave Mandel, we had a full-day active shooter preparedness exercise and drill at one of our local high schools prior to that tragic and horrible event. We were prepared. We didn't know it was going to happen. We didn't know it was going to be a crisis. It happened outside of the city. But my understanding, and don't quote me, but this is what I've heard, we were the city fire department about a couple of seconds ahead of even the county responding. So we were prepared for that event. We didn't know that event would happen, but we were prepared. Then the second thing that we had was between January and February, when, like I said, the mayor had to go home to say goodbye to his dying mother. The mayor left on a Wednesday. I got a call on Thursday concerning an extreme personnel issue. Trust me, it was extreme. And I listened and I talked to staff and I said, we need to have a plan about how we're going to handle this. And so I kind of put on my prosecutor hat and we had a closed session. We called 3 witnesses and went around the horn to get questions from everybody to see if they were satisfied with the outcome. And when we got done, it was averted. It was an extreme situation, and I will say this, it would have changed the entire trajectory of this city. And I told staff, do not mention this to the mayor. He's at home, you know, he's in the middle of this situation, but I didn't tell him never to tell him. But about 2 years ago, we happened to be talking, and I told him about it, and he was shocked, to say the least, as to what had happened while he was gone. But that's the crux of being prepared, of being able to manage, having the opportunity and the experiences there. Then we had 1 month later in March, the pandemic. And you still have to provide the services to everyone, but we had to pivot and be flexible. We had to immediately go to a situation where there had to be some planning. And Chief Simmons, again, as Deputy Chief Mandel, put together a strategy. On Mondays, we had virtually a business leadership meeting with the businesses in the city, the leaders within those businesses. We listened to them. What are your challenges? What are your problems? How can we help you? Mayor Buckley, hands-on, would say, let me go down to Main Street and see what's going on with such and such business. I was on that call, along with, at the time, Alderwoman Tierney, who was Alderman for Ward 1. So on Tuesday, we had a full-blown virtual meeting. The mayor would give his remarks initially, and then the city manager would give his opening remarks, and then we had Dr. Kalyana Raman from the health department to come in and speak to us about what was going on. And I could relate to that because I worked for the health department. He wasn't there when I was there. But anyway, so he would come in and give us what was going on around the county. Then we would have a special guest, and as I recall, the first special guest that we had was a gentleman from Carroll County who had some connection with the nursing home. And he was telling us, this is what's coming to the rest of the state and possibly the rest of everybody here. And so we had that. And then what we would do, because all of the directors were in those meetings, I was representing the council, each director would give a report out. What's going on in your department? How are you making out? Transportation, what's going on? Public Works, what's going on? I've got a problem. Rec and Parks would say, well, transportation, I can help you with that problem. And so we would go around, but also in those meetings where either themselves or the representatives from, at the time, Senator Elmer's office, Delegate Shanika Henson and Dana Jones's office, and Lisa Robbins' office. So we got a good flavor of what was going on with them. They got a good flavor of what was going on with us. And it was extremely helpful in getting through the tough times. And then the third meeting, I was not a part of, was Wednesdays. There were meetings concerning internally what was going on with the staff. How's the staff doing? What do we need? Do we need to put up petitions? Or are we going to have people coming in, not coming in? So those were those conversations. In the meantime, I was still working for the school system. So I was having other meetings with nonprofits and other folks within the county and the city. I was the city rep at that time. And Lynn Farrell Collins was the assistant city manager. We would work with her. We worked with Aaron Snell from Charting Careers. So we had those other meetings that I was kind of the go-between between the school system as well as with the city as well. All of these crises we've had. The next one that I personally had was Tornado Ida. Wow. I was at work. My husband, we worked in the same building. Told to leave. Got as close as Office Depot and Lidl or Shoppers at the time, and had to walk home. Didn't know what to expect. My girlfriend had called me and said she lives very near to me and the Rural Health Center, and she had to park there. And she said, I can't get home. And I say, I know she doesn't drink. What's going on? And so when I got there, I realized I had never seen anything like this. You see it on television, but you never think it's going to happen to you. And so she had to get over the fence. This is the funny story. She had to get over the fence to her house, and the neighbor next to her literally hoisted her by her booty and got her over the fence. But anyway, she got home. So when we got there, things were in total disarray. I didn't know, frankly, honestly, what to do. Kevin Simmons calls me up and says, Rhonda, we got this. Don't worry about a thing. They set up a command center immediately. We had Mayoral Church to be used as a kind of a center for resources at the time. And the next day after this happened, the Governor Hogan came, and we walked the entire neighborhood for probably close to 2 hours. He was talking to residents. He was very cordial. They videotaped it, and so it's on my website. And so we work with the Red Cross. We work with a lot of entities that really got us through this. And Senator at the time, Senator Elworth and her people, the county people, they all came out, helping clean up. We got a lot of food from Monica. Yes. And so it was really, really, really a great opportunity to see how it works. You know, you see these things in other people's communities in other states, but when it happens to you, you're kind of clueless. They took over everything and took care of everything. I just had to make sure that I was there and the residents felt safe. And I had to we went through some state legislation for businesses, but we also did some things for residents as well. Everybody has been made whole. We had a private concern come and give gift cards to my renters over at Annapolis Gardens because they had some issues and some of them didn't have renters insurance. And some were underinsured, so we had to go through that process. But there was a big process that we had to go through to get and make sure everybody was made whole. The last thing I want to talk about briefly is my parents. I'm an only child, like I said originally. My father was a diabetic for half of his life for 45 years. Never had anything amputated or taken off, and Carol knows my parents well. They used to come to all the games with Chet and Joe and all. And so my dad, when he was about 11, was at death's door from what I was told. In fact, Mr. Mills was the principal, sent all the children over to his house to say goodbye to him. But he lived to be 2 months shy of his 90th birthday. When he was about 45, he was on, he did contracting. So on the roof of Mayoral Church, fell on his head on the concrete. And this is a story I don't have time to tell, but it's a riveting story. Didn't have any complications or anything behind that. And so he lived, like I said, to be 2 months shy of his 90th birthday. My mother had had Parkinson's for at least 30 years. So I was in charge of their caregiving. And I had to manage a staff of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, day person, Tuesday, Thursday, day person, night person, 8 to 8, and a weekend person. And I was still working at the time. And things, when in 2003 in the summer, I could see their health beginning to fail. More and more doctor's appointments and all that sort of thing. So in February of 2004, I told Ms. Jessica, the state's attorney, I said, I need some family leave. I took 3 months and then an additional 2. And 5, oh gosh. Okay, okay, not a problem. And so I retired. That's why I retired from Baltimore City. And so it was an experience on a personal level that gives you the fortitude to do it, and sometimes you try to find out how you could do it. So all these crisis and emergencies have two commonalities: having the ability to be flexible and the ability to pivot, literally at a moment's notice, but to continue the regular services. I've worked and communicated with many of you in this room, especially in the past 6 years. Been thoroughly and enjoyable, productive experience. Bill Riker, Peter Bittner, Jackie Wells, Paul Rankin, Kathy Ebner, John Vandekamp, Lily Openshaw, Robert Meyer, Barbara Beeler, Debbie Dillard, Christopher Golden, Charles Fernie, Nadine Chin, Vic Pasco, and my birthday buddy, Diane Butler. But anyway, and I've worked with them on various projects. We talked about community benefits agreements. We've had joint projects for Forest Drive Eastport sector study. We've been involved in 3-hour meetings when it had to do with public safety and many, many more. And again, I've had a lot of professional as well as personal experiences and challenges, which has led me to several expectations under a Pindell Charles administration. I'm going to stop there.
And tell us about that. What do you want your administration to accomplish?
Okay.
What's your vision?
Fiscally, I will start with myself by taking the current alderperson salary of 18 and some change, plus $1 for the first 2 years in office, and using that additional $160,000 for the 2 years in a way that can support our community. And I haven't fleshed that out yet, and that will come. And hold on one second. My plan is to keep all at-will leadership. Again, continuity of government. When I was in the state's attorney's office, I had a young lady, and she said, "Ron, I'll have a stroke if I go to court." I said, okay, and we had 2 sets of people, charging unit, we had the charging unit and the court unit, and we switched every 6 weeks. I said, okay, Kathy, I'm gonna give you the bulk of the charging cases, those ones that are complicated, and some people say, I don't wanna sit at a desk all day, I wanna go to court. So it wasn't an opportunity to take work away from her, it was just more of a balance of opportunity. And so what I wanna do is have that same mindset when it comes to continuity of government, and to take a look at our residents, our businesses, increase leadership and staff communication, efficiency and accountability, as well as professional development. Continue to increase our partnerships with law enforcement. We've had great partnerships, FBI, Homeland Security, ATF. Meet with each ward at least once per year. Meet with our boards and commissions once per year. My campaign manager here, Mr. Gary Elson, who's one of our retired city assistant attorneys who staffed our boards and commissions. He has a lot of great ideas and suggestions, and I'm listening to him as well, but I want to listen to everyone. With the Experts Develop Initiative called Passport for Life, where you birth to 24, by the age of 6, you should be able to swim. By the age of 8, you should be able to read, literally. By the age of 11, you should have interacted with a senior person. By the age of 18, maybe had a nursing home experience. But going through the steps of what children should be able to do by the age of 24. And I got that from Erin Snell through Charting Careers. That was an idea she had several years ago. Establish some pop-up task force work groups for 3 to 6 months to look at certain targeted issues. Establish a kitchen cabinet. Maybe about 20 people, many of you here in this room, let's meet, tell me what you see, the boots on the ground. What are you experiencing? I want to know, because I may not be out there. You all are out there, you see what's happening, I want to know what's happening. Doesn't have to be formalized, but some sort of structured system. Establish a city foundation with a tax write-off, with a variety of uses. Say there's someone in planning and zoning who wants to go to a unique conference in Delaware, and it costs $2,000. Apply to the foundation, anybody can donate to the foundation, get a tax write-off, and maybe that will be helpful. If you have a child that you're mentoring, several children, a group, they're planting trees, you need $500 more to complete that project, apply to the foundation to do that. Continue on that trajectory of our environmental health, resiliency, sustainability, and technology. Our partnership with the county and Mr. Matt Fleming, who's doing an amazing job. I've chatted with him on many occasions. Very impressive. We are in excellent hands. I've been reading the reports. With that being said, be prepared, good manager, preparation. Now this time, you have my folder. Because I figured being prepared, we might not get to all the questions. So what's in your folder is everything. I think I've hit probably 90% of it. Sidewalks are in there. Conservation easements and some other things. I even have a pen in there talking about public safety, So everything that I do is going to be centered around spreading the love. If you see the hands on the map, we need all the hands. There are different kinds of hands. You have tattoos and rings and everybody, all kinds of hands we want in there. And so, and a youth hand as well. And we all do comparison shopping. So in the end, we want the very best product serving as your mayor with all of this and more. I'm very confident that I'm prepared to manage this organization, this city of Annapolis, with the level of trust that is needed to continue to move forward. And I look forward to your vote for me as your next mayor of this great city. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your remarks this morning, and you certainly are prepared and have a terrific resume. I wanted to ask you, at this challenging time, why do you want the job?
Good question. You know, there's several reasons. I grew up in Annapolis. My family, my paternal family has been here since the Civil War. My mother's family, the Queen family up in Severn, a little enclave called Queenstown, started in the White Marsh area of Sacred Heart Church right over the line. My cousins traced the lineage back to 1704. My family's been here a very long time, both families. And so I went to high school, I went to elementary school, and when we moved on to junior high and high school, there were a lot of problems. And some of these stories you really don't want to hear that I experienced. And I think a lot of us who went through those experiences experienced a trauma. And as a result of that, you see all these public and subsidized housing units. And I know a lot of the people who have lived there. I went to school with a lot of them. And to be quite honest, I feel like I really need to give back on a more global basis. I owe it to the people that I know. I'm probably related to half the people in this town. But I feel like that I should do that. And I'll say this, and I'm not going down a religious road, but I'll say this, spiritually, I think that's what I know that's what I'm supposed to be doing. The things that have happened to my family, even my dad with that story, I could tell you that story now if you wanted to hear it. But it's real. It's a lot. And so the people that have helped me along the way, that's why my theme is spreading the love. Because my thing is, that's what I've been surrounded with. It's like a family. We don't always agree with our family members, but we still love them. And that's what I love about this city and this family and this city. And so that's why I'm right. I believe that that's what I should do to give back.
Ron, I wanted to ask you this.
Oh, hi.
Alderwoman Pindell, I envy your energy. It makes me tired, but I envy it. I have lived here 60 years. It's my city of choice. And for the last 24, I lived on Northwest Street, which is right next to St. Anne's Cemetery. I do believe it is the best street to live on in Annapolis. I backed up to Stanton Center. I sold that house to East Steps in November, and I've been house sitting at 208 Clay Street. I have wonderful neighbors. They are white, they are African American, they are Hispanic, they are hardworking, they have children in school, and they do not deserve the last 2 weeks that they've had. Last week, we had a double shooting, and this week, we had a double shooting with a homicide witnessed by a school bus full of children. This neighborhood, if you go through it, looks nothing like it looked 20 years ago. There's been a lot of public housing, a lot of habitat housing, and some just people fixing up their houses. And when I first came down there, I was looking at the public housing. It looks as clean and no trash as it did 4 years ago when it opened, or 3 years ago, whatever it was. People are proud of where they live, and it makes a difference. but we can't go on like this. These people, I'll be leaving, because these people are coming back from Florida that I'm house sitting for, and I'll be leaving. But these people do not deserve this, and that I want to know what can be done about it.
Great question. And I communicate with the chief and the deputy chief on a very regular basis. And we constantly talk about that. We've done a lot of work when it comes to cameras and monitoring and hiring people and recognizing. And what I will say is, coming from Baltimore City, we all three of us did. There's not much we haven't seen, but there's a lot going on. But what I will say is this. Immediately after that press conference the other day, I went to the chief's office and we sat and talked for, I think, over 2 hours. We have come up with a plan, a more aggressive plan that you will be able to see even more. And I took some notes because being prepared, I decided to write down the notes to make sure I didn't forget anything. I'll start off by saying in 2024, there was a 67% decrease in violent crime. That's good, but we have what we have. And what I've been kind of noticing over maybe at least 1 year, the first 3 months of the year seem to be very troubling. There was a decrease in most crime categories last year. The police department will continue to use existing technology, closed-circuit TV, and intelligence to continue this trend in crime reduction. APD is again developing a summer crime plan to put more officers in strategic locations to prevent crime strikes. With that being said, the chief and I talked the other day about seasonal crime plans, one for the summer, one for the fall, one for the winter, one for the spring. We know in the winter, we have a lot of shopliftings and thefts and that sort of thing around the holidays. Community meetings, and this is our kind of general plan. We're going to fill in the blanks later. Community meetings held on a regular basis. Regular basis. Some communities more than others. Some monthly, some bi-monthly, some quarterly, some triannually, some semi-annually. We plan to bring in partners. And if you saw the press conference the other day, Dr. Pindell was there at the press conference and spoke. Anne Arundel County Public Schools, the County Health Department, and the library. We're going to start there. And we plan to grow these partnerships. We are looking at possibly scheduling 30 minutes with the children prior to the adult meetings. It will be something that will be ever evolving and growing with residents' input and involvement. And this is something definitely we can talk about later for that. As far as the cameras are concerned, the city is in the process of hiring a maintenance company that will maintain and service TV cameras. Keeping the existing cameras operable is crucial. In addition to CCTV, the county's real-time information center, which is RTIC, is now in operation. RTIC is a 24-hour operational center that uses camera technology to assist in combating crime. We're in the process of integrating our CCTV cameras with the county. There's also a component of the system that will allow local businesses to integrate the existing store cameras into the RTIC. For example, Kinder Care and Harbor House Eastport has been a great partner. I met with them earlier this year and we're scheduled to meet quarterly. I'm scheduled to meet quarterly with them. So we're gonna, my whole thing with we have an incident, we have a meeting, and then it kind of falls off the radar. My thing is, let's have them consistently on a, like I said, monthly or quarterly or whatever basis. If one person shows up, still have the meeting the next time, and still have the meeting the next time. Because eventually people will start coming and go, oh, I guess they're serious. And so that's my whole thing on consistency. I want to be consistent in what we do, no matter what it is, unless there's some true emergency and we just can't have it. And that's being realistic and flexible. But, so does that answer your question? And it's going to be, this is videotaped today, so you can go on my website, friendsofrhondapindellcharles.com. If you want to go back and look and see what I said today, that's why I wrote things down, because I want to make sure. I'm not a, environmental specialist. I'm not, I've never been a doctor, but I have some level of understanding, and I want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Rhonda, I wanted to thank you for stepping up as a candidate. It's very respectful. It's a tough job. I want to ask you the same question I asked Jared last week, and that is, what are your views on the Maritime Welcome Center?
Okay. Funny you should ask that, Phil. I will say what I said in testimony, what was that, 2 weeks ago at the historic preservation hearing. What I did, and my testimony was totally different than everybody else's. I talked about my mother and I, when I was a child, going every Saturday pretty much downtown. We stopped at the Reynolds Tavern, where the library was in the basement. And Miss Eloise Richardson read to the children. We went to Bill's Kitty Bazaar, Slama Shoe Store, the list goes on and on and on. Those were my beautiful recollections. I saw people that worked there from my church. My aunt worked at Jenkins Stationery Store. Miss Alma worked at a dress shop. Mama Lil, her aunt, worked there selling Avon. But these were the faces of people that either lived downtown or came downtown. And it was a wonderful experience for me, the 5 and 10 cent store. And so I gave my rendition of what I remember as a child, which made me who I am today. And so what I'm saying is, when we look at the Maritime Welcome Center, we look at the park, we look maybe at the fountain, the ferry. We want, and I'm hearing too much of things around here are now more for visitors versus residents. And what I'm saying is, let's try to bring in some things that hopefully, that I would love. I remember my parents talking about taking a ferry from here over to the Eastern Shore and back. They had a great time, obviously. They had me, but anyway. So those are the kinds of things I see in what we're gonna be doing downtown. We all have had homes built. We knew it was gonna be the perfect home. We put down what we wanted in it. But then when we got in there, I said, I wish I had done this, I hadn't done that. It's not gonna be perfect, okay? We're imperfect people, we're gonna make imperfect decisions. But what I will say is this, I'm looking forward as we go along to make maybe some adjustments. And I know everybody's not gonna be happy about it. That's just life. If anybody who has a spouse knows that. I've been married almost 46 years. We don't always agree. But what we will hope for is something that can be not only pleasing for more visitors to come, but for us as residents to go downtown. A power couple, and I won't tell you who they are, recently told me, and they've been around a long time, they said one day they sat downtown for 4 hours and they didn't see a soul that they knew. Not one soul. And so I don't want that. I want everybody to be welcome at the Welcome Center. And if there's some things we can do to get people there, by golly, let's do it.
Rhonda?
Yes.
Rhonda?
Yes.
2 questions.
Yes,
As
ma'am.
you're well aware, we have an affordable housing problem, so I'm interested in your perspective on how we should tackle that. And second of all, I've heard that the election board is at least considering whether we should have a closed primary or an open primary for Annapolis elections, and I'd like your perspective on that.
Okay, let me start with the housing first. First of all, I think a lot of you saw the $3.5 million that we're going to be using for the backlog for a lot of public housing, because we have a lot of offline units. And so we really need to get them fixed, and that will bring, will lower it a bit. And Alderman Arnett and I talked about this a lot, about these small area plans. My thing is, when you look at the city, everywhere you go, you hit water. So every ward is different, and we've all come up kind of with the same but different situations where we want to have housing. What may work in Ward 8, maybe 2 duplexes, may not work in Ward 2 or Ward 4. But we want to take a strategic look at where we may be able to have some affordable housing. By me being right on the cusp of the county, I couldn't do anything about all that went on Riva Road. So I've been very strategic about what I wanted in Ward 3. That's the main reason, because I've got to deal with the traffic and the density on the other side of Route 2. So we had a 10-point protocol that we followed. We tell developers no if we don't want it, but we went through a systematic approach to that, and I talked to Ross about it, and Bill's very concerned. We talked about that as well. And so affordable housing can be in places that we never even imagined. Nobody's saying we're going to put up 50 units here or 100 units there. It may be 2 units here, it may be 4 units there. Very tastefully done, works with the community, but look at that small area plan. Each one of us had an opportunity to provide 6 points that we wanted to do. As far as the voting and the election, I have not studied it, I'll be honest. I don't know the answer to that. That's one thing that I have not looked into, but that's something I do need to do, so sorry about that. I wasn't prepared for that.
Hi, Rhonda, Christy over here.
Oh, Christy.
Yes, hi, thank you so much. This was a great presentation today, and I hope that, you know, everybody will keep an open mind that even though another candidate has been in the race for a while, that, you know, you still have the opportunity to get everybody, you know, to present in these opportunities and perhaps gain their trust and their vote. So 2 things, and I'm not sure your thoughts on this, but getting back to the gun violence, has there ever been a talk about maybe doing gun buybacks so that we could actually get the guns off the street?
Well,
And then,
okay.
sorry, my second question is around monopolies. It just seems like there's a few developers that are taking over, particularly Main Street, but also across our city and county that are buying up all the properties, particularly our marinas. So has there been any talk about antitrust and monopoly legislation so that, you know, we don't get owned by 3 people?
Okay, let me take the initial thing first. What I want to let you all know, I knew I wasn't running for alderman and alderwoman anymore. What I have done, and this is how I operate. There's a young lady in Ward 3 who I've been grooming to run for office. I don't want to leave Ward 3, you know, unattended. I'll leave it at that. So I'm supporting her. I started with her last February. And I pretty much got her all settled, and she's worked for the city for a while and that sort of thing. So that's, I didn't want to concentrate on myself. I could have started earlier, but I didn't, because I wanted to make sure that Ward 3 at least was taken care of from my estimation. So that's why my launch wasn't until September. I wanted to get her on board first. As far as the gun buyback, we had last May, and then we had another one in November maybe, a gun give back. And we collected 100 and some, I think, the first time in May. A lot of ammunition, but also a grenade. There wasn't live, thank God. And then we had another one in November. Still a lot of guns were collected. And what the chief and the deputy chief have said, in Baltimore City, even with a gun buyback, we did much better than they ever would have done. And what I did was, I didn't go, well, I was there after, for the press conference for the first one, but for the second one, I actually thanked people for coming. They didn't have to get out of their cars, just open their trunks, and the police took them and categorized them and did what they needed to do. And I think it was over 6,000 rounds of ammunition that were collected. So it's been out there. And what I also would hope that you all and everybody else, look at the city's website. It's full of information. But one thing I would say, sign up for the press releases. You get a lot of information off of those press releases. Mitchell Stevenson is great. She puts out a box, and 7 days out of the week, at least 3 go out. So sign up for the press releases. And the last thing is the businesses and the property owners from out of town, and I know where we're going with that. I've heard a lot of that. There is, I guess, I'm a person who's going to look at each individual situation on its own merit. I have not been involved in that. I did go to Baltimore, I guess it was 2 years ago, with the mayor and a couple of others to talk to Alice. That's what you're talking about. And so my thing is, I want to look at each individual situation. I have really, at this point, really no control over what's going on. Sometimes you don't until you get in there and you actually see what's happening. And sometimes, depending on who you are, you might be able to scare folks off. Not to say anything. So, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, just a question, it's about the parking, but, you know, I'm concerned about downtown Annapolis, you know, they messed up, the city messed up the market house, and then they messed up parking. Now, the city document, I'm concerned about that. But the question is, what are you gonna do about the parking mess in downtown created by Park Mobile?
Okay, now, as most of you all know, there's a concession agreement. Carmel O'Neill is the standing committee chair for the council. I know she's been working very diligently on that. We have connected with our Office of Law. We have gotten confidential information concerning steps that we may be able to take to deal with that. And that's a work session that has to happen behind closed doors, and Alderman Arnett can certainly chime in at any point if I'm off base or he has something to add, that'd be great. But that's the last that we've seen. Am I correct, Alderman Arnett?
Yeah, this is your show, but
No, this is our show, Alderman Arnett.
Okay,
the agreement is with
Medco.
And so we basically gave away our direct control over the parking, but if the Alderwoman is correct, Carmel O'Neill, Alderwoman from Ward 2, is really putting a lot of pressure, is her chairmanship from Transportation Committee, and pulling the people from Park Mobile in. There are certainly many more modern ways to do parking than what they're giving us, and if pressure works, maybe we can get them to change.
And I'm on that Transportation Standing Committee along with Rob Savage. Carmen Alderman O'Neill is the chair. So she's been working very diligently. And they do come in every month, and we do scour them when we're not happy. But in many ways, as Alderman Arnett said, there are other components to it.
I don't usually have to keep us on a tight time schedule, but today, we've been asked to close out quickly because 88 tons of gravel are going into that parking lot very soon. So we need to get all the cars out pretty quickly today. Not usual. So again, I would like to reiterate, I didn't know how prescient I was when I introduced you as prepared. I didn't know that was the thing in the morning.
I was Girl Scout.
So we do very much appreciate your really lifelong commitment to service to our state and our community, and your time as Alderwoman, and always it takes something special to step forward in a race like this, so we appreciate your doing that. Well, thank you for coming.
I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
Couple of appreciation.
Oh, thank you.